The following program contains politically irreverent commentary. If you suffer from an exaggerated sense of self-importance, this show might not be right for you. Check with a PhD in PC, ASAP.
Proclaiming the truth in the highways and byways of the world. Fighting for justice in the dark alleys of politics. Raising the voice of resistance to a fevered pitch. And he knows where to find the best and worst jail food in America. Randall Terry.
Thank you. Who cares what Randall thinks? Yo, mama. And by the way, I like your mother. She's a good woman. That's why she watches this program. Ladies and gentlemen, we have a lot to talk about today. President Obama pouring his guts out on 60 Minutes. And Keith Olbermann from MSNBC temporarily canned. And Nancy Pelosi and John Boehner both saying the same thing? Who's right? Today's program brought to you in part by MSNBC, where we punish our correspondents for being consistent, and by Nancy Pelosi, the poster child of the Democrats and the Republicans for the next 2 years. I'm going to take a quick break and let Jihad Granny have a try at it, and then when we come back, more content in 1/2 hour than you will possibly know what to do with. Back your philosophical dump truck up, son, because I'm fixing to fill it.
Allah Akbar. Good morning, boys and girls. It's so good to have you. Today, we honor Al-Qaeda. Yes, they rounded up those polytheists, those women and children, and they blew them to pieces in that church in Baghdad. That's what you get for being polytheist. But Al-Qaeda, what heroes. Surely they will have a special place in paradise.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the #1 television program for the Tea Party movement, yours truly. Glenn Beck wishes he had what I got. Just give me a chance, just give me a shot at Fox. I'll show you what it's all about, Mr. Beck. Hey, you're not going to see Glenn Beck anytime soon up on Capitol Hill lobbying John Boehner, holding his feet to the fire. He might like to use Samuel Adams' name, drop Patrick Henry's names and words once in a while, but he's not going to use their tactics, and he's certainly not going to possess the fire that they had in their belly. All right, in today's program, we're going to be talking about John Boehner and Nancy Pelosi, how basically they're saying the same thing. Who's right? We're going to talk about Keith Olbermann getting canned over at MSNBC. I'm rejoicing, but not for the same reasons that some people. And John Stossel had a great program last night on Fox News or Fox Cable, one of the shows, on the integration of the Tea Party movement with the Libertarian movement or the divorce. We're going to talk about that in today's program. I am committed to using this show to teach you how to think. Not what to think. I'm not trying to tell you what to think, but how to think. How to identify the philosophical underpinning when Obama says something, or Pelosi, or Boehner, when they say something. Sometimes they're saying the same thing. And I want all of us to be able to identify, hey, that's socialism. Hey, that's Marxism. Hey, that's freedom. Hey, that's true patriotism. It takes time, friends. We've all been catechized in the temples of our adversaries. And until we get a true transforming brainwashing, we're just going to be regurgitating our socialist training until we, well, let's stop with that illustration. All right. You may have heard or even seen last night that John Croft over at 60 Minutes interviewed President Obama. It was an incredible interview. More than 2/3 of the show. And to be honest with you, 60 Minutes was actually hard on the president. 60 Minutes? Tough on Obama? It's inconceivable. It's inconceivable too. Yes, it is inconceivable. But you know what? A broken clock is right twice a day, and last night was 60 minutes. Lucky day. They're the broken clock who happened to get that one right. What we're going to do is we're going to roll segments of that interview, 3 segments, and I want to analyze them very quickly. Let's go to the first question. Why the low voter turnout?
Senior citizens, independents, young people and African Americans did not turn out in large numbers. How do you explain that?
Well, as I said, I think that folks are frustrated with what they've seen over the last 2 years. One of the challenges we had was that we'd lost 4 million jobs in the 6 months before I was sworn in. We lost 750,000 jobs the month I was sworn in, 600,000 the month after that, 600,000 the month after that. So what you had was the economy continuing to get worse in the first several months of my administration before any of our economic policies had a chance to be put into place. Appropriately, I'm held accountable for that.
Please note, they're not frustrated with his ideology. They're frustrated with the fact that his ideology and his policies haven't caught up to bless them in the pocketbook. Let's go to the next segment and see how Obama says, I haven't changed my ideals at all. And by the way, the guy who's interviewing, his name is Steve Croft, not John Croft. Hello. Roll the tape.
You ran as somebody who was going to come to Washington and change it, and in the end, as some of your predecessors, it ended up changing you.
You know,
to a certain extent.
Yeah, I'm not.
You haven't given up.
Exactly. I think it's fair to say it hasn't changed me in terms of my ideals, but I think that in terms of how I operated on a day-to-day basis, when you've got a series of choices to make, I think that there are times where we said, let's just get it done, instead of worrying about how we're getting it done. And I think that's a problem. I'm paying a political price for that.
Just get her done. It was Larry the Cable Guy meets Mr. President. Get her done. Roll over, people. Get her done. There's a political price to pay, Mr. President. That's what he said. Now, again, notice, it's not that they repudiated my socialism. And I certainly haven't changed my ideals. But people don't want to be run over roughshod. We have to put a little bit more velvet on that iron fist if we're going to get her done properly. But finally, this is where he really shines and shows that as a country, we really do want socialism. And unfortunately, I think he's right. Hey, Tea Party people, listen, he's about to call you out. He called me out. Listen.
According to the exit polls, 4 out of 10 voters on Tuesday said they supported the movement. How seriously do you take the Tea Party, and will it make the task of finding common ground with the Republican Party more difficult?
Well, it'll be interesting to see how it evolves. We have a long tradition in this country of a desire for limited government, of a suspicion of the federal government, of a concern that government spends too much money. I mean, that's as American as apple pie. But you're still confronted with the fact that the vast majority of the federal budget are things that people really think are important, like Social Security and Medicare and defense. I mean, we're going to have to, tackle some big issues like entitlements that, when you listen to the Tea Party or you listen to Republican candidates, they promise we're not going to touch. Those are the choices that I think Republicans and Tea Party members are going to have to confront in a serious way.
Listen to me, fellow Tea Party members. He hit the nail on the head. There have been Tea Party people saying, we're not going to touch Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security. Well, then guess what? You don't really want to end socialism. You don't. When we come back from this break, I'm going to show you how we have each other's hands in each other's pockets and what it's going to mean if we're really going to be free and slowly, in a humanitarian way and yet a timely way, repudiate socialism. Don't go away.
President Obama is the first case of polio since the widespread use of the Sabin and Salk vaccines. Infantile paralysis.
moments with Moses. If you will not obey the voice of the Lord your God, or be careful to do all his commandments and his statutes which I command you this day, then all these curses shall come upon you and overtake you.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the #1 Tea Party program. Listen to me. President Obama said Tea Party people don't want to touch socialism, the heart and soul of it. Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security. Is he right or is he wrong? Let's just step back for a minute. Let me ask you a question. What right does the government have to reach into your pocket and take your money to give it to Wall Street, to failed institutions, banking, to insurance, to auto manufacturers? What right does the government have to take your money and give it to those people? I would say they don't have the right. I didn't say the power. Clearly they have the power. But the right implies an ethical right. So again, I ask you, what right does the government have to take your money and to give it to those Wall Street firms? I would say none. We'll talk about why in a minute, but let's just hear me out. So now here's my question. What right does the government have to take money from those wealthy Wall Street people and insurance people and automotive moguls? What right does the government have to put their hand in those people's pocket, take the money out, and give it to you for your Social Security or your Medicare or your Medicaid or your farm subsidy or your college grant or your food stamps? Well, they're rich and I'm poor. Whoa, whoa, whoa. That's socialism. That's Marxism. That's class warfare. It's the politics of envy and greed. It comes from the heart and soul of Marxist ideology. Woe to you, beware. If you just said, well, they're rich and I'm poor, you are singing the song of Marxists and socialists. I hate to be the one to give you this wake-up call. But the truth of the matter is that we have been catechized on the plantations and in the schools and in the temples, the ideological temples of our enemies. The government doesn't have the right to reach into your pocket and give it to wealthy people on Wall Street. And the government doesn't have the right to take their hand and stick it in the pocket of wealthy people on Wall Street and give it to you. And by the way, when the president said, we've got to worry about entitlements, Social Security, Medicare, defense. Hey, Mr. President, don't lie. I know if your lips are moving, you're lying. Defense is not an entitlement. Defense is part of the general welfare. Defense is part of the Constitution. The Army protects everybody, rich and poor, equally, okay? So when he said that, when he lumped defense in with Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, he was lying. Defense is not an entitlement. I'm going to take a break. When we come back, we'll go to John Stossel. We'll talk about Nancy Pelosi and John Boehner saying the same thing. We'll talk about Keith Olbermann getting fired from MSNBC. Don't worry, they're going to hire him back. You and I, if we're going to really have revolution, then we must base the revolution upon unchanging principles that come to us from God, not from our own thoughts, not from a majority, not from the latest hip philosophy, but that come to us from above. So when we come back, I'm going to actually open the segment talking about how God himself wants to take care of the poor and just how he said to do it. You are going to love this. Don't go away.
Randall Terry.
Success cannot be guaranteed. There are no safe battles. Sir Winston Churchill. Welcome back to the program, friend. Part of our Christian duty and our Judeo-Christian heritage is the care of the poor. Jesus John the Baptist, they constantly talked about the poor. In fact, Jesus said, I was hungry and you fed me. I was naked and you clothed me. Saying, whatever you did to the least of my brethren, you did to me. So we know that God cares about the poor. Socialists as well claim to care about the poor. The issue is, how do we deal with the needs of the poor? Well, without quoting chapter and verse, I'm going to take you through a very quick Bible study. We're going to come back to this again and again. What's God's first line of defense against hunger and poverty? Labor. You eat. The Bible says that the hunger of the laborer drives him on in his work. If a man doesn't work, let him not eat. Work. Second line of defense is family. If a man doesn't care for his own, he's worse than an infidel, his immediate family. Then we see the kinsman redeemer lived out in the life of Ruth. We see it in the book of Ruth where the extended family cares for each other. Then we see the gleanings. God said, when you grow a crop, don't pick all the fruit. Leave the edge all the way around. And if you're going along and you drop something out of your hand, don't pick it up. Leave it for the poor of the land. Throughout the Old and New Testament, we see these various ways in which God cares for the poor. But guess what? It's never under threat of government punishment. God says, if you mistreat the orphan and the widow, God said, I'll make your wife a widow and your children orphans. God said, if you're mean to the orphan and the widow, I will kill you. But he doesn't say that Caesar has the right to kill you. And he never gives Caesar the right to wrench your money from your hand to care for the poor. Individual work, immediate family, extended family, the community through the gleanings. Even, I think every third year, the Levites were required to take up a special offering to care for the poor. I'm going from memory here. The point is that God really does care about the poor, but he does not allow the government to compel. We need to return to freedom and true love and true compassion, caring for one another in the Judeo-Christian heritage that's been given to us, not the one forced upon us by Karl Marx and President Obama, and dare I say it, John Boehner. Let's talk about John Boehner and Nancy Pelosi for a minute. When the election was over, John Boehner, crying, said, this is a great victory for the American people. Nancy Pelosi, a couple days ago, being interviewed by Diane Sawyer, fought back the tears and said, this is a great defeat for the American people. Who's right? Listen, they're both lying. Did you know that? They're both lying. Because what they're saying is that the American people are a block of people that are committed to the same ideology. The deceit is this. America is in a massive divide right now. There are people fighting for freedom who understand it. There are people who are sort of fighting for it but don't really understand it. And then over here you've got people who want socialism, who want to take money forcibly by the government, putting a gun to their head to pay for whatever it is that they want. A cash for clunker, whatever, all right? There is a divide. And so, by definition, if one person wins, somebody else is going to lose. If we do end socialism, there are going to be winners and there are going to be losers. So John Boehner nor Nancy Pelosi can say, the American people. We are entrenched right now in an ideological divide, an ideological, dare I say it, war. And there have to be victors. And that means there has to be losers. I'll be right back. Don't go. May his days be few. May another seize his goods. May his children be fatherless and his wife a widow. May his children wander about and beg. May they be driven out of the ruins they inhabit. George Washington said, discipline is the soul of an army. It makes small numbers formidable, procures success to the weak, and esteem to all. Friend, if the Tea Party movement is going to be successful, it must have the discipline to define and then hold on to core principles. If you look at what John Stossel said the other night on Fox, it was brilliant. He said the Tea Party can't decide if it really is socialist or not. And if the Tea Party doesn't decide it's going to repudiate all socialism, it's simply going to be absorbed into the Republican Party. And then finally, Keith Olbermann at MSNBC. Listen, when you have somebody who's really articulate and a fool, well, you have Keith Olbermann. But MSNBC should just let him say what he wants and give money where he wants. Then at least he's honest.